What is going on, guys and gals? Brooklyn bound the raid scientist here, and today I'm going to cover how to do the 5 raid challenges in Salvation's Edge. If my video today helps you get any of these challenges done, I hope you would consider subscribing to the channel so we can help you out with whatever other Destiny 2 content you might need in the future. Now, each challenge is a separate chapter in this video, so just skip to the encounter you want using the timestamps in the description. Remember, you can only complete each challenge when it is the featured one for the week. So you'll need to check the bottom left of the screen when you launch the raid each week to see which one is active. Also note that I am not going to go too into detail in the base mechanics of each encounter. I am making the assumption here that if you're trying to do the raid challenge or master level challenge that you already know the base mechanics of how to do the raid. If you are needing a full guide, check the link down in the description for my Introduction to Salvation Edge full raid guide. Okay, let's get started here with the first challenge in the first encounter, Substratum, and the challenge is called Scenic Route. This challenge requires you only kill the Overload Minotaur that's in the 4th room during the Add Clear phases. You cannot kill the Overload that is in the 3rd room. So, remember that when the Add Clear phases start, 2 doors are going to open up in the middle room where your teams will split up. There are 2 Overload Minotaurs in each of the paths that each of those 2 teams take. One of the Overload Minotaurs will show up in the 3rd room of adds for one team, and the other Overload will show up in the 4th room of adds for the other team. You can only take out the Overload that is in the 4th room. Killing the one that's in the 3rd room will fail the challenge. So have your team split up and start pushing through the rooms to clear adds. If your team reaches the 3rd room and has an Overload, you don't want to kill it. Instead, keep it stunned and take out all the Hydras so the other team can progress into their 4th room, where their Overload will be waiting to be killed. Once the Overload dies, the Overload that is being kept alive will despawn and the Tormentor in the middle will spawn as normal. You can tell very early on in the ad clearing phase which team is going to get the Overload that needs to be killed in the 4th room, because the first room they enter will have 2 Hobgoblin snipers. These Hobgoblins spawn only on the side that will have the Overload in that furthest room. What makes this challenge a little difficult, especially on Master, is the fact that it takes a little while longer to clear through that extra room, leaving you tighter on time at the end of the plates and resonance phases. It's important when doing this challenge that you don't fail the plates mechanic and spawn a subjugator, and that each player picks up as many resonance possible to get back to that 4-minute and 15-second timer. Another tip is how to quickly know where the starting plate in the ping pong chain will be. Finding the starting plates in the ping pong sequence can be very confusing if you do not know how it works. The starting plates that glow will always be in the room where each Minotaur dies. There is this thought on the second round of adds that the 2 starting plates will be in the rooms with both Minotaurs, but in actuality, each starting plate will be in the room where each Minotaur dies. So on the first add clear round, when you kill the Overload, keep note of where it was in relation to the center. Then, on the second round of adds, also make note where the second Overload is dying, and you'll automatically know where to go to start the ping pong sequence for both teams. If you're like me and you constantly get turned around and you're not knowing which direction is which, a good way to ground yourself is when you're in the middle room taking out the Tormentor, look for the wall in the back with the pots and put your back to it. Now you're facing forward where you entered, and you can just do room callouts based on that. Some people number them, some like to do directions like left, back, far, whatever. Just do whatever works for you. Just know that the 2 starting plates will always be in the 2 rooms where the Minotaurs have died. The first one on the first round and the second one on the second round. And that's the challenge. So on all rounds, every single time you're clearing adds, you can only push into that 4th room and kill that Overload to spawn the Tormentor, leaving the one that's up in the 3rd room, or the one that's seen first, alive. Okay. Next up is the challenge for the second encounter, Dissipation, or Herald of Finality. This challenge is called At Capacity. This challenge requires that any time you deposit resonance, or open the resonance box, that you can only have ×3 resonance only. If you have ×1 or ×2 resonance when you open the box or deposit, the challenge will fail. Now, there are a few ways to coordinate how to do this effectively. I want to start off by saying that depositing 9 resonance is all you need to get maximum time on the timer, as each resonance will give you about 20 seconds, and 3 minutes is the max on the encounter. So you don't need most people at 3 resonance. At minimum, you just need 4 people to have ×3 resonance to complete the challenge and get max time back. One of those people with ×3 will just open the box, and the other 3 with ×3 will use the 9 resonance deposited for max time. Alright, so how do you do this? Well, run the encounter as normal with 3 teams of 2 in each area, doing the call to reckoning, getting stolen favor, and then pinging the plates back and forth to spawn resonance. You want to pre-assign one of these teams to always be the last side to close the conductor, for 2 reasons. First, whoever the conducting closing player is in this area will only be grabbing ×1 resonance of whatever shape their conductor needs just so they can close it, leaving them with no resonance when they are done closing, because remember, the conductor will take one away from you. The second reason is that having one team delay closing their conductor allows the other players to come over from the other sections to their area to top off on resonance after they have closed theirs. Remember, closing the conductors in your area will despawn all the resonance. Essentially, you want all 3 players who are sending the charge in all 3 sections, aka the 3 players who are not closing the conductor, to all get ×3 resonance each. Then, you want at least one of the closers in one of the sections to grab ×3 as well, and then close their conductor, leaving them with ×2. Then, that person can quickly run over to the side that is delaying closing their conductor to grab a 3rd resonance so they're back at ×3. This will give you 4 players with ×3 resonance. The other closing player on the side that is not delaying closing can do one of 2 things depending on your team's comfort with the encounter. They can just grab 1 resonance and close the conductor, leaving them with none as well, or they can grab 3 resonance as well and then close, leaving them with 2, and then also run over to the delayed side and grab an extra resonance so they can be at ×3. The reason you would want to do this is because if any one of your ×3 resonance players dies for any reason, they will lose their resonance, so having a backup could be helpful. When we did this challenge, we had the right team be the team to delay, and the middle team have the person who comes over to grab a resonance to fill back up. This is because you can jump across through this opening and grab this resonance on the stairs relatively quickly, without having to go out by the boss or deal with the knights, which is more dangerous, especially on Master. Remember also that whoever opens the box to deposit will only add 20 seconds to the timer, but for this challenge, they still need to have ×3 resonance. So unfortunately, 2 of their resonance stacks are essentially getting wasted because they still only add 20 seconds to the timer even though they're opening with 3. That's why you want at least 3 other players with ×3 as well to get maximum time. One other final tip on this challenge is that if you ever mess up or someone has 2 stacks going into a damage phase for whatever reason, remember you don't necessarily have to wipe. You can just have that person not deposit and revive them when the resonance kills them after a minute. As long as you have enough time on the timer and enough revive tokens, this could be a way to deal with the miscue of someone accidentally grabbing one. Also, this is why it's not a bad idea to have the extra 2 closing players rotate over to the side that is delaying closing their conductor to grab that extra resonance to top off at 3, because it will provide another player with ×3 if something goes wrong. All in all, it's really not too bad of a challenge. On Master, you can still get a 2-phase, just make sure you match your surges that the Master Challenge provides with whatever heavy weapon you're using for damage, and you should be able to get it. Alright, moving to the 3rd encounter challenge in Repository, called Balanced Diet. This is a pretty simple challenge in concept. It requires that you never, throughout the entire encounter, across all rooms, ever pick up the same shape resonance 2 times in a row. This includes the square at the beginning of the encounter to start it. So whoever grabs that square and starts the encounter cannot grab a square again until they've picked up another shape. And this also includes moving from room to room. So if you grabbed a triangle in the first room last, then you can't grab a triangle first in the next room. So in concept, it's pretty easy. Some tips here. First, start each room as normal by bouncing the charge back and forth, and you want to bounce it for a total of about 5 plate touches in each section to spawn maximum resonance. Then, intentionally fail it, and take out the subjugator that spawns. Then, allow the conductor closing players to first go grab the resonances they need, since they'll need to rotate between types to meet the demand of the challenge. Once they have what they need, The plate sending players, or the ones in the back, can just grab 1 or 2 each of the leftovers as well, and then send the charges via the plates so the conductor closing players can lock the circuits. While many people might do this already, it's pretty helpful to allow everyone to rotate to a different side to grab the shapes they need. Since the closing players will need specific shapes, it's best to have the sending players wait so they don't snag a resonance that someone might need. The other tip here is to just have a scrap paper or something to just quickly write down the last shape you grabbed in each room, as there is a decent amount of time before you start grabbing resonance in the next room, and it might be kind of easy to forget what you picked up last in the previous room. Mute your mic and shout it out to yourself 3 or 4 times, or write it down so you don't forget. You can just use text chat in game if you want, but keep in mind, all 6 players are probably going to need a way to remember this, so it could get flooded if everyone's using text chat to do this. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward, likely one of the easier challenges you'll do in this raid. Just be careful you don't jump on a resonance accidentally while running around and fail the challenge. Okay, moving on to encounter number 4, Verity, and the corresponding challenge, Varied Geometry. This challenge will definitely test both the inside players and outside dissection players' knowledge of the encounter and the shapes. This challenge requires that you use all 6 3-dimensional shapes to escape the solo rooms before reusing them. Now, some of you might be scratching your head thinking, well, all the guides so far have told me that I have to use the 2 shapes that don't match my Guardian shape, and while that's technically true, and it's also the fastest way to escape, but as players has kind of dove more into the encounter mechanics of this part of the raid, they have learned that ultimately there are some rules for escaping that as follows. 1, the key you make, which is a combination of 2 2D shapes, to escape cannot contain the 2D shape that matches your Guardian statue. Second, the final 3D shape on your outside statue via the dissection team must match the key you've made on the inside. And 3, and this is the important one for this challenge, you must have exchanged both of your original shapes on your wall and have received both shapes your Guardian isn't holding at least 1 time. So this means you can actually escape the room with a sphere, cube, or a pyramid, which are called the perfect shapes, or doubled up of 2D shapes, as long as the rules above are met, and this is how the challenge works. You have to escape the solo rooms using all 6 3D shapes at once before reusing them. So to do this challenge the easiest way, you'll want to first do the first round of the encounter completely as you typically would the normal way, which is making the 3D shapes cylinder, cone, and prism to escape. So for example, if the callout is triangle, circle, square, then the left player holding triangle wants to make a cylinder via square and circle. The middle player wants to make a prism via triangle and square, and the right player wants to make a cone via circle and triangle. Nothing new here, AK, run it the way you typically do it. Now for the second round, since you already used cylinder, prism, and cone, you now have to make the cube, sphere, and pyramid to escape this time, which is trickier and takes some extra swapping because of that third rule we mentioned earlier. This is why you want to do this set of shapes in the second round, so you only have to do this 1 time to finish the challenge. So at the start of the second round, in this case, as soon as the inside players are teleported in and call out the 3 statues left to right, you will need to decide as a team ultimately which perfect shapes you're going to make where, because there's always going to be 2 options for each statue. The triangle player could escape with either circle circle, which is a sphere, or square square, which is a cube, and the same for the other 2. So you need to get on the same page with each other. I think it's best to just shift left or right or clockwise 1 and set them as that. So for example, if the original call out is triangle left, circle middle, and square right, then you're going to have all circles end up on the left for a sphere, all the squares up in the middle for a cube, and all the triangles end up on right for a pyramid. Once you've decided what your end goal is going to be, the inside players have 3 rounds of swapping to do this time. Remember, you can't escape unless you've given away both your starting shapes and have received both shapes that aren't yours. So the inside players will start off like they normally would actually, by first getting doubled up with their own shape. The triangle player is giving away all the non-triangles to the matching player, the circle player is giving away all the non-circles to the matching player, and the square person is giving away all the non-squares to the matching player. Now, once all the inside players are doubled up with their own shape, they will continue as you normally would again, what we call splitting, or giving each of those shapes away to each of the other two players. Triangle player gives away each triangle to the other two players, etc. And the result is all three inside players now have the two shapes their statue isn't holding, which is very similar to the normal way you do it. And now the rule of giving away your starting shapes and receiving non-matching shapes has been met. Now, you finally need to acquire the combination of shapes you originally decided on at the beginning of the round to make those perfect shapes. So this is where you're going to make note of what you determined each guardian is going to collect at the end. So going back to our example, we said that triangle player was going to get circle, circle for a sphere. The circle person in the middle was going to get square, square for a cube. And the square person on right was going to get triangle, triangle for a pyramid. Now, you just give those shapes to the players that need them. So for example, if you're the triangle person and you now have square, circle on your wall from the first two rounds, you remember that you are trying to get circles to escape. So you need to give your square away to the person that's collecting squares. In this example, it would be the middle statue. If all three players do this, you'll end up with all the correct perfect shapes to escape. Now, while this is all going on, the dissecting team is also having to match the same 3D shapes, which is why determining which statue is going to get which as soon as the teleport happens is important. This could take an extra dissection depending on where you start with, but the dissection job is still the same as normal. It just may take some extra shapes to get there. Once all the inside players escape with the perfect shapes, the rule of the challenge has been met, aka you've now used all 6 3D shapes to escape now, and the third and final round of the encounter you can do as normal once again, because you're allowed to use the normal cylinder, cone, and prism shapes. Alright, so here is a quick summary of how to do the second round of the shape swapping. First, you get doubled up, looking for the exact same shape your statue is holding, and give away the shapes that your statue is not holding to the corresponding players. Second, you're going to split those shapes then to the other two players. So, you give one symbol each to the other two players. Now, all three players will have the shapes that don't match their guardian statue. Finally, the third round of swapping, you make note of what shapes you are trying to collect to make your perfect shape, and give away the one that doesn't match to it to the guardian who is collecting that shape. It is very important when doing this challenge, especially on the second round with the extra swapping, that the inside players don't get ahead of one another. You don't want to end up in a situation where players have extra shapes on their walls and can't spawn knights to send other shapes. So pace yourselves. Get doubled up first, then split, and then do the final shape swap to get your perfect shapes. If you're on the outside team dissecting and forming those perfect shapes is confusing to you, use a cheat sheet. Remember that essentially once you determine what the final statues need to hold, you're never going to put that shape into the statue to dissect it. For example, if the left statue is ultimately going to be circle, circle, aka a sphere, then you're never going to put circle into the left statue on the dissection side. This challenge can also be a bit tougher on master level, because the combat and unstoppables can be pretty challenging, especially in those solo rooms. Make sure you're using your best survivability loadouts and find ways to get cure or restoration via the healing grenades, Banner of War, and things like that. I also recommend something strong to take out unstoppables, things like Parasite and Xenophage we used in our run for a lot of success. Remember that when both knights go down in the solo rooms, unstoppable will spawn, and when all 3 knights go down in the outside room, 2 unstoppables will spawn. So be prepared for them immediately, especially if the knight dies near where they spawn and you're trying to run in and grab your shape, they can melt you. Pay attention to weapon surges and overloaded weapons, and Master too if you need help with the enemies. There is a lot higher risk for deaths on Master, so it's extremely important that the solo players keep track of where they are in the process of swapping shapes. In the event you might die and have to swap with someone else to finish the job for you. You're going to quickly need to explain where you were in the process so they can get up to speed quickly. This one can be a bit of a pain, especially on Master, but once you understand the rules, it's really only one extra shape swap on the inside rooms in the second round, and maybe an extra dissection as well for the outside team. Okay, and moving on to the final challenge for the 5th encounter Zenith, aka the Witness. This one is called Coordinated Efforts. This challenge requires that you break all 6 of the glyphs or buttons on the witness's chest at one time, and you have about a 4 to 5 second window to do this until the challenge fails. So, to do this, you're either going to need a few players who are very good at breaking more than one button at a time, or you can just do it the way it's intended and have all 6 players on your team get the glyph breaker buff, then go centers together and break all his glyphs together as a team. So, the concept of this challenge is pretty simple, but it's going to require those ad clearing Andes on your team to learn how to get glyph breaker now. As a quick refresher, remember step 1 is to shoot the wrist while standing in an attack that matches to reveal the bracelet or shape needed for glyph breaker. Circle attack is the arm coming up from the ground, triangle attack is the arm coming down from the sky, and square attack is the sideways arm. Step 2 is to go get that resonance buff that matches the shape on the wrist you revealed by standing in the correct witness attack. And then step 3, return back to the hand with that revealed wristband, now with the resonance buff in your possession, stand in the matching attack and shoot the wrist again to break it and get glyph breaker. Also remember that if you take too long to get back to the hand and it disappears, a new one will spawn somewhere else, but can possibly change. You can get lucky and hope that the new one is the same, and you can still get glyph breaker, but if it doesn't work, you'll need to go get the opposite resonance and try again. It's always a 50-50 chance in this case. I think the best way to coordinate getting everyone efficiently into the running role is to pair each person up with a partner and assign each team of 2 a symbol. One person on each team will go first and get glyph breaker, and the other person will go second. This way people aren't competing for glyphs on the wrists. The other extremely important note about this challenge is that when each player gets the glyph breaker buff, they're not going to be able to go middle immediately and shoot the button to cleanse their resonance stacks, because they have to wait for everyone to do it together. So people are likely going to have their resonance timers reaching 0 before all 6 players have gotten the glyph breaker buff. To keep from dying to this, remember that you can pick up a new stack of resonance to reset the timer. So pay attention to your resonance timer, and when it gets down to about 10 or 15 seconds, go search out an arm attack and re-up your resonance to reset the timer. The sideways hand attack that gives hexahedron resonance is probably the most safe on master difficulty because the circle and triangle are often in the middle of a bunch of chaos and a little bit more lethal. But any of them will work. Now, one perk of doing the challenge in this way is you're not going to have any subjugators to deal with until the DPS phase starts. But after DPS phase is over, I highly recommend taping them out quickly before their running phase starts up again. Keep in mind that during DPS, if you don't take them out, because you're probably not going to have enough time, the Strand Subjugator can be quite a pain and suspend you in the middle of DPS. Starting this week the video is releasing, Bungie has nerfed Still Hunt with Hunter's Celestial Nighthawk interaction by about 33%. With that said, I still think Hunters are probably the best DPS option for the Witness, but other classes just aren't as hindered. Still Hunt is very strong, and if you're doing it on Master, I highly recommend matching your ad clear weapons to the weekly surges as well, because most teams going for Master are probably going to be 2-phasing anyways. And that's all the challenges in Salvation's Edge. Again, you can skip back to any of the timestamps if you missed one. These challenges are all going to be active until August 6th of 2024, as Bungie is making them all active to account for the bug that they were having with the Triumph. Then, after August 6th is over, they will go back to being one challenge a week. So make sure you pay attention to which week it is if you're watching this video after the 6th, so you can do the challenge one at a time. Thanks for watching, Guardians. If you learned something today, please click that like button and consider dropping a subscription, and we will see you next time.